Yes, I'm Tõnis Saarts. I'm an associate professor of comparative politics at Tallinn University in Estonia. And I have been interested in democracy, democratization, the rise of populism, populist parties, political cleavages, and more probably about comparative politics and political sociology, because those two disciplines are overlapping anyway. So yes, it's a bit complicated because yes, there are roughly about 27% or a bit less Russians. I mean, yeah, only ethnic Russians are taken into account. But at the same time, in Estonia, we are mostly talking not about the Russians, but about the Russian speakers. And here it comes a bit complicated because if we talk about Russian speakers, then we have to include Belarusians, some other ethnicities from the former Soviet Union, Caucasia, Central Asia, there are people like that as well, and then Ukrainians. And concerning the Ukrainian minority, it's also a bit complicated. Some of them arrived at Soviet time, but now we have about 60,000 Ukrainian refugees. And many of them are actually also Russian speakers. So it's a bit complicated, and according to the statistics I know, we have to consider something like 32% of the population as the Russian speakers. So we are talking roughly about 1/3 of the population, or a bit less. So 1/3 of the population could be considered as Russian speakers. So regarding the political regime in Estonia, it could be considered a classical liberal democracy. It has all the features of the liberal democratic regimes, free elections, free and fair elections, freedom of speech, assembly, freedom of media, separation of checks and balances of power, the rule of law, and all the other relevant features of the liberal democracy. I mean, the human rights and minority rights are respected. Equal citizens' rights or citizenship, and so on. Regarding electoral system, it's proportional electoral system, which is a bit more complicated than in the neighboring countries. But yes, it's a proportional system. And regarding the party system, it's a multi-party system with a balance between the parties. It means that we don't have any dominant parties in Estonia. Usually we have something like 56 parties represented in the national parliament. So the party system is quite fragmented, but it's not exceedingly fragmented in comparison with some other Baltic countries, in which it has been even more fragmented. And regarding party system institutionalization, it has been not very high. because if you're looking at government formation and coalition formation, because we always have coalition governments in Estonia, if you're looking at the coalition formation in Estonia, then it's difficult to see any specific rules or regularities there. Basically, all the parties can make coalitions with other parties. There are no parties which are permanently excluded, or no parties which are have been almost permanently in the government. Since there is, all the parties can cooperate with each other without much restrictions, and so it's difficult to see any specific patterns there which makes it very, let's say, regular or predictable or institutionalized. Regarding party system fragmentation, if we compare Estonia with Hungary, for example, and formerly also if we consider PIS government in Poland, then the big difference between Hungary and Poland on the other hand, and Estonia and other Baltic states on the other, is that our party system has been much more fragmented. There is no party which is able to secure the parliamentary majority or legislative majority, like it happened in Poland with PIS or in Hungary with Fidesz. So it's impossible in Estonia, even for the illiberal populist parties, to govern alone and to form government alone. And if you have a coalition government, then you have to make more compromises. And in the case of the coalition government, per se, the democratic backsliding would be less unlikely in comparison with the situation in which the illiberal populist party is ruling alone. And regarding the Russian minority, here again there is a big difference between Estonia on the one hand and Hungary and Poland on the other. Hungary and Poland both are the most monoethnic societies in Europe, but in Estonia there are about 32% of the Russian speakers, and so Estonia is a multi-ethnic society, and it's quite unlikely that any populist illiberal party in Estonia is able to secure the legislative majority without mobilizing the Russian votes. But the Russian speakers as a minority very unlikely would vote for an illiberal populist party. Usually minorities are not very eager to vote for illiberal parties which promise to restrict minority rights. And in that sense, the Russian minority makes it almost impossible that any illiberal populist party in Estonia is able to secure the legislative majority in the parliament. Yes, there is a plan to revoke the voting rights of the Russian minority in the local elections, but right now we are talking only about local elections. And Estonia has been very exceptional in Europe in that respect, that it allowed all the residents to vote in local elections. For example, in the neighboring Latvia, in which there is an even bigger Russian minority residing in Latvia, Latvians have not offered that kind of rights to their Russian minority. So in that sense, it's going to change the local politics, but not domestic politics in that sense that in parliamentary elections, non-citizens, Russian citizens in Estonia have never had the right to vote. So I was talking only about the parliamentary elections and about national government. In local governments, the situation could be very different, and it doesn't matter actually so much. The classical example of defensive democracy is Israel. If you consider the rights and liberties of the Palestinian minority, you cannot say that they are absolutely equal with the native Jewish majority in their democratic rights. There are a lot of democratic rights which are restricted for Palestinian minority because of the national security reasons. I guess that in all Baltic states, included Estonia, yes, we are moving towards the direction of becoming a defensive democracy, in which, yes, for specific groups, especially for the Russian minority, some of their rights, democratic rights, will be moderately restricted. Of course, it's debatable to what extent it's reasonable to restrict these rights and so on. For example, regarding the Russian TV channels, actually Estonia is not the only one which has restricted. So also other European countries have done this, restricted the access to the Russian TV channels and Russian official propaganda. So yes, it's debatable whether it's a restriction, a big restriction of democratic rights or not. In Estonia, according to the different surveys, ethnic Estonian population has a quite uniform perception of the war. For them, Russia has been an aggressor, and they are siding themselves with Ukraine, so there is no doubt. Regarding the Russian minority, different surveys have produced different results, but very roughly about 1/3 or less of Russian minority are rather supporting the Kremlin narrative, and they are with Putin. 1/3 roughly is undecided, or they don't want to express their opinion or to side either with Russia or Ukraine, and roughly 1/3 or a bit more could be considered as pro-Western and pro-Ukrainian. So in that sense, the Russian minority is split. There is a clear split within the Russian minority, and it's also, what is important, it's also a generational split. Among the younger Russians, about 60%, or even roughly 2/3 of them, actually are not supporting the Russian official narrative, and they could be considered rather as pro-Western. So in that sense, yes, there is a big generational split also within the Russian minority. Western-minded younger generation versus rather, let's say, Putin-minded or more or less Putin-minded older generation. Regarding this year's military parade, I guess that one thing which was affecting the participation, why so many people turned out, was that the international security situation is very complicated, and people are quite concerned about what will happen with Ukraine, with the NATO, with Eastern Europe in general, with the Baltic states, and so on. So people are very concerned about the possibilities that we will have a new Munich or Yalta agreement with the great powers, which leaves or would leave the Baltic states virtually defenseless. The National Independence Day is a major national holiday. So in Estonia, it has specific rituals, specific events which could be associated with that. And this is the day in which, yes, like in every other country, people are proud of their country and so on. Regarding the National Independence Day military parade, actually it hasn't never been one of the highlights of the day. It has been it has always been a part of it, because it happens almost in every country. So it's a compulsory ritual. You have to have this in order to take this day and the country seriously. But the highlight has been rather the speech given by the president, and when there is reception in the main theater in Tallinn, Estonia theater, and this has been one of the major highlights of the day, not military parade. So in that sense, it's rather a civic holiday, not so much associated with some military aspects. So the speech did mention national security, defense, and so on, but it wasn't the major focus of the speech. It was only mentioned, but the major focus of the speech was that we have to find some new ways how to develop Estonia any further, how to develop the Estonian success story any further, how to contribute to our success story, and so on. So there is needs some kind of change. And like for the cars, we have to change the gear. I mean, because you cannot use the same gear for all the roads. You have to change the gear, and changing the gear and the ways how we developing. This was one of the major messages of the speech. Mostly in the economy, but also in education. Changes maybe also in social sphere, because aging of the population is also one of the big challenges for Estonia. Also, the president mentioned the energy policy, which is one of the major issues, the Green Deal, environmental policy. But first and foremost, the economy and education. Those were the major focuses of his speech and major focuses of the messages. We have to bring some change. In the context of the liberal world order, indeed, the small states, the position was more secure, and mostly because the liberal world order was based on two major premises. First was it was very rule-based. It based on international law, on international rules, and the second, there was also a premise that those countries which are following the model of liberal democracy, like the US as a hegemon of the liberal, as the former hegemon of the liberal world order, was doing, then those countries which are following this liberal democratic model, American liberal democratic model, those countries would be not left behind in the case if there is an aggression against them. So they would be defended by the big powers of the West. I guess that the major challenge which would raise or appear is that if the world and Europe and big European countries gradually shift away from liberal democracies. I mean, for example, we would have in the future have Marine Le Pen as a president of France, and I don't know, Alternative for Deutschland in government in Germany, and some other illiberal regimes like in Hungary, raising also in some other Eastern European countries. Then, of course, I guess there would be some temptation among the Estonian elites to follow suit. And this temptation could be not only the case of our major populist liberal party, EKRE, but also there would be case that some other conservative, national conservative parties also want to model themselves as EKRE and somehow try become more illiberal in order to in order to follow suit and in order to please some big powers, for example, Trump's America and Marine Le Pen France and Alice Weidels Germany and whatever. This is my major concern. I think that here in the Baltic states and also among the Nordic countries, the perception of that war is different. Because I think that if Italians or Portuguese or French are thinking about this war, they are not thinking about this war in the way that if we are not going to stop Russia now, then Russia will be at our doorsteps. They don't see this in that way. But for the Baltic and Nordic countries, there is issue that if Russia is going to win this war, or perceives itself as a winner of that war, then probably the next targets will be or would be one of the Baltic states, and if the Baltic states get attacked, then of course this war will also involve the Nordic countries, Finland, now Sweden and others. So it's going to be a big regional conflict in the Baltic Sea region. For the Baltic region, if America is pulling out, if it happens, then literally it will be more or less as a disaster for the Baltic states, because let's be honest, for Kremlin, they are not afraid of Europe in military sense. Europe is not a military power for them, a big military power. They take into account. So in that sense, yes, it might be more or less as a disaster for the Baltic states, because here we are not only talking about some troops in the Baltic states, but we are talking about some symbolic issues and perception. For Russians are honoring the power. I mean, they and for them, the only major power in the world is the US, not Europe. And if the US pulls out from Europe or NATO, and in Kremlin it could be seen that yes, Europe is free for taking. I guess that in that case, of course, European countries have to contribute quite a lot to their defense, but it's going to be very complicated, because the different parts of Europe, they have very different perceptions of defense and also military risks. It's very difficult to explain to Portuguese that yes, if we are not raising the national defense budget up to 5%, then Russians would come. For Portuguese, it's not an argument. But for the Baltic states, it is an argument.